Hello and welcome back to the podcast We Are Selling, brought to you by Realtair, the home of pitch, sign and sell. Last week, Daniel Spencer, one of our wonderful Australian coaches, came on air and we discussed what is going on with implementation and the challenges that everyone faces. And we had some great feedback from that particular episode. So today we've invited him back and we're going to do a continuous progressive topic of time management. And actually our topic today is navigating time. He joins us again, Mr. Daniel Spencer. Welcome aboard.
Lee, love to have you. Given it's time management, we've got 3 minutes, all right? Let's nail it.
Here we go. Mate, take us into it. Your observation of how, you look at people in their effective year and people doing incredible things and not. The only one thing we all have in common is time. It's the same time. So your efficiency or your ability to finish things. And only 3 weeks ago, we had Karen Ritchie's on the program, which was a great episode because Karen is been in real estate 16 years, always worked 6.5 days a week. She's now working 30 hours a week, doing her best numbers ever, cracked the $1 million mark in fees, getting her highest fees ever. And we had such a response to that program. Daniel, where do you think people go wrong with their time?
Lee, it starts with thinking. So let me give you an example. I find that when I meet people, they might come up to me and say things like, geez, you're busy. Dan, you're flat out. Geez, you look like you've got a lot on. And I think people's narrative always is, yeah, I am. And I think you've just got to watch what that does to your productivity. Because if I believe I've got no time, essentially you're not going to create any more opportunities. You're not going to invite any further vendors into your life because you're really saying to the universe, I've got no time. So I'm really conscious of protecting that idea. So when people say to me, and they lead in with, oh, you've got no time, my response always is, look, we can always do more. We're just grateful for the opportunities in front of us. Do you know anyone? So I think you just got to be careful with that concept. And then, again, the mindset with that for me is I'm great with my time. I'm elite with my time. And what I try and say to people is you don't have busy days. You have busy moments in the day. And it's really trying to understand how the mindset then affects whether or not you're going to essentially build strategies into finding more time or making different decisions around your time. But it all starts with whether the individual believes they've got time or not and how they relate to that subject.
This is such an interesting topic because I hear people say things and I think, how's that serving you? I think, what do you mean? You've been saying that for 10 years.
Yep.
And then people say to me, oh, you're so busy, you're all over the country, you're in different countries. How do you do it? It's what I do. I do it by consent. It's what I wanted to do. At the beginning of the year, I agreed to take on certain projects and workload, but I have an expectation of myself I would do that. I don't think I'm normal. I think I didn't come this far to stop. And yeah. I think it's a very important point that, right now, you're at peak times of certain things. And when you've done anything for 30 years, it's that last grand finale part of I've actually had enough train wrecks, enough things happen to understand what's going on in front of me right now. I'm really enjoying this. I don't look at it as a burden, but you're right, that inner voice, what are you saying to yourself? How's it serving you?
It's the thing, right? So I try and debunk the theory by saying, let's just open your diary and have a look at what happened yesterday. And as they're opening the diary and they're showing me, they're already making excuses about the fact, oh, yesterday I went to the chiropractor, so there was not much done. Okay, let's go the day before. And you look through and go, well, I think without you realising it, you're telling yourself a mistruth. There's plenty of time there, right? And then often people say, well, I'm busy in the next coming days. And I go, well, let's have a look 2 weeks from now. Is there anything in your diary? And they're going, no. Okay. So to me, this is a scheduling issue. So you're not scheduling enough ahead of time or you're not prioritising what you're scheduling. So it's trying to get them to understand the idea that they have time. It's just that if they believe they don't, they're going to create busyness, noise, particularly in their own mind, and that'll stop them from doing the things that actually matter.
Yeah, and you've just sparked something in my own mind. For me, my day has to have sprints in it of time, but chunky time. So an hour for this, 3 hours for that, 2 hours for this. Yet I've worked with other people that have 30 things in my 4, all these little 15-minute meetings, and you look at the color coding of their diary and you think, that's just a mess. How could you concentrate and be very careful out there? People have meetings for meetings for meetings for meetings. When do you get time to do the actioning? So I think it's very important in the bookings of your calendar that you protect time for the actioning of things. Everyone's trying to get to something and onto something and onto the next, but you got to sort of got to lock down sometimes and go, for the next 3 hours, I know in my world, for the next 3 hours, I'm going to work on that and I'm not going to work on anything else, versus 10 little things in that time. What's your thoughts on that?
I just did a sales meeting this morning for a client who's a new client, and they showed me how they did it. It was just a sharing of information waffle fest. It was just it's just boring. So I said, let's not even call it a sales meeting. Let's call it an action meeting. So we went through all their current listings. I'm going, okay, that one there that's red traffic lighted, that's overpriced by 10%. Whose is that one? Great. When are we going to see the vendor next? What's the price reduction going to go to? What are we going to attempt to do with the buyers? Who are we going to cross-sell? So I'm creating actions as we're running the sales meeting. When we finished the sales meeting, there was like 50 things for the team to do. And I said to the business owner, like, you've got to get something out of this thing. Like, you've got to be able to set or the idea of the sales meeting is to set a velocity or a tempo that's going to happen straight after. Otherwise, why would you be getting 15 to 20 years staff, stop making phone calls and actually pull them in unless you're going to be able to reset the business? So I think, actions and being action orientated is really important, which is why, I've always trying to lead by the idea when I'm working with people. Okay, when are you going to do that? Let's pull your diary open. Let's schedule that at 2:00. And if I know that person in the past is a swing and a miss, I might say something like, look, at 1:30, I'm going to text you to remind you that thing. I'm going to motivate you. And then at 3:00, when it's finished, I'm going to check in to see how you went. So it's knowing how to sort of, depending on the person in terms of, their ability to execute, how to actually hold them accountable to that thing and really make sure they perform.
And out of everything we do in our business skills, your ability to be effective, and I mean personally effective. I see fakeness in effectiveness, where I need another person for this, I need another girl for that, I need another person. You think, there's just so many people here, and there's 4 of you doing the workload of one. Like, I know people that do far more than all of you put together, yet the cost base is blown out because you think you're delegating, but you're actually not getting hands-on yourself. So, like right now, you and I are recording, there's no engineers around me, I'll do the edit and it'll be finished and it gets loaded. But I can do that as a sequence versus, okay, I've done my part, pass it on, pass it on, pass it on. Getting hands-on today and being your own mechanic has become more important than ever before.
Lee, let's look at the concept of just reading emails, right? And I talk to this, people think that they don't have time. And I'm like, do you read emails with an intent to respond? Or do you just read them for the sake of reading them to decide whether you want to respond or not? And most people just read emails for their own excitement, for their own curiosity, for their own addiction, right? And I'm like, unless you have an intent to respond, I just want to call this for a moment. You're wasting 200 hours a year reading emails. I respond to everything that I read for the first time. And even if I don't have that information, I'll say, oh, hi, Lee, it's Dan here. I just want to let you know I've read your email. I'm across it. I've diarised to do it at 4:00 Friday. Just keeping ahead of the energy and making sure that you're responding to everything, is a big part of it. Another thing, I had my, so obviously like you, Lee, I do a bit of travelling. A few months ago, I had my EA. She said, you do realise when you bring me the receipts, it takes me a full day to enter them in every month. And I'm like, oh my gosh, really, a full day? She says, yeah. And I said, well, how do I actually make sure that doesn't happen for you? She goes, well, you can scan them straight into Xero. So anyway, okay, show me how Xero works. So now I hop out of the car. It takes me literally 10 seconds.
Hub doc.
The thing in, right, straight into Xero. I've saved my EA a full day and I can get to do other stuff now, right? So it's just that little moment of scanning a receipt in, me learning a new behaviour. There's no stress on my shoulders.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you find time instantly. So there's just those little moments you've got to be thinking about. How do we make sure that we're doing things that allows people to stay in their lanes and do the dollar productive tasks?
Yeah, this is a good example, working in real time. So if I've got something to do, I'll do it now, not wait and store. So I'm like you, I'm in the back of the cab, got the receipt on my leg, taking a photo in the hub doc, goes straight into Xero.
Do it.
That scans it, does all the mathematical. Then the girls don't have to go through and process all that because I had time when I'm in the cab to scan it myself.
That's it.
Versus you do this, you do this, you do this. Get hands on to you and know how it works. I think a lot of people get caught out by not knowing something. I know myself, I have to use a lot of equipment now in the multimedia world, and I'm watching all these training videos because I need to know when there's no one else around to help me that I can pull that together.
So the difference between procrastinating and precrastinating. So what you're talking about is precrastination, your ability to be able to hit it head on. So that might be you're walking a buyer through and the discussion of needing a broker has come up. Well, let me get him on the phone now. Or you're in a listing presentation and the owner's like, oh, we might want to get someone to fix, the back rumpus room wall because the kids marked it up when they were, well, let me get the painter on the phone right now. So it's your capacity to be able to, I call it endurance to urgency. It's your capacity to be able to step into that thing in the moment and address it in the moment, if it's possible, to then take that thing off your shoulders later. And the other concept I often talk about is, and I'm really big on this with our clients, is there's no use in having a meeting unless you leave by booking the next one beforehand. So I use the concept of ham, bam, have a meeting, book a meeting, have a meeting, book a meeting. The best time managers will never leave a listing presentation. They'll never leave a phone call with a buyer. They'll never leave a phone call with a prospect until they've, first of all, agreed on when they're going to next speak, attempt to set that appointment in that meeting, ideally via calendar invite, and then lock them in and keep that person in market momentum. Otherwise, as you know, Lee, it's too hard to get people back on the hook.
Yeah, do it in real time. So, Daniel, we're coming up to the end part of this little part of our time management world. What's some of your best time tips that our listener can take away today and start to give consideration of implementation or activation, which is actually the name of your company?
Let me give you 4 things. I think agendas are important. So I'm a really big fan with, when we pop out and see you in the appraisal, what are the main things you want us to initially focus on? So I'm really big on knowing what the subject matter is before you step into it, putting it into the Outlook diary. When you arrive, you confirm the agenda and essentially you ask them how much time is and you stick and you tick, which means people stay on subjects. That's one thing. You've got to spend time on time management. So every morning I spend about 15 to 20 minutes. And one of the techniques that I learned many years ago is I call it yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I do it every morning. So I have a quick look at what happened yesterday. I have a look at my dial calls, my missed calls, my text messages, and I go through the process of really trying to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. I have a look at today quickly. Have I got everything I need? Do I know everything that's happening? And essentially, am I prepared? And then I look at tomorrow very quickly, and I always confirm the appointments the day before. Going through that rhythm of yesterday and say tomorrow means that if anything fails to be missed on the checklist, all that sort of loose hanging stuff that can be a little bit unpredictable, I always find it by going through yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And then from there, essentially what I'm doing is relying on checklists. Like we had an example, I was in Perth, it was nearly a month ago now, and I've rocked up to the venue, there's 400 people there waiting for me. Workbooks hadn't arrived. And I rang the girls and I'm like, what's going on? No workbooks. And they said, well, I rang and it was on our checklist to ring and I've ticked it and they said it had arrived. And I'm like, okay. But the workbooks had disappeared. It's very stressful. There's no workbooks. What are we going to do? So anyway, they ended up finding the workbooks. But what we did is we added to the checklist workbooks, who's got them, what room are they in, and can you take a photo of them out on the desk in the conference centre before we go live? So I always say, if the thing breaks, blame the checklist. If the person's not using the checklist, that's operator error and that's on you. So we are a very checklist-driven business, but sometimes the checklists aren't detailed enough and you've got to really refine them further.
And checklist version 58 becomes very, very important. I had the same thing happen to me in Perth. I was at the Crown Casino. My manuals aren't in the room, and I've gone looking for them. And they said, no, they're not here. Well, Robin said they've been checked off as arrived. And they said, well, we've had a lot on. The Lion King's on. So I went into the Lion King section where you can imagine the Lion King being on, and there on a little trolley is my books, and it was like, ta-da! I found them, and it is terrifying. But the checklist then becomes, as you just said, where are they? What are they? How do I put my hands on them is the next question, because in a big place like that, anything can happen. But in a big place like real estate, anything can happen. And the listed to settle checklist, I did 2 seminars today about how do we sell a house? People go, what do you mean? How do we sell a house? There's 10 milestones, 23 steps, and 138 actions. And they go, don't know what you're talking about. That's because we don't know how we sell a house.
Hold on.
And once you can gain visibility on that, and I think the listed to settle checklist is the most important one, because it's what we actually do for a job is protect the asset. And if we miss things in that checklist, the impact on the vendor is huge. And that's not fair. It's like getting on a plane and they say, oh, we don't need the checklist today. We should be fine. No, I think you should pop through that. There's a lot of lives on board here that are expecting to reach their families, and they have a call and response checklist of yes, no, yes, yes, no. And then the guy on the ground, the lammy's got to pull the pin out, put his hand up in the air with a ribbon on it, which means the checklist has been checked and checked, which means all those families get to reach their destination. And I think if you start to have that way of thinking, and this is a fascinating topic. My first slide in my slideshow is my checklist for presenting. And people go, you do this all the time. Why would you need a checklist? Because I don't want to think about it. Did the flicker get charged? Did this happen? And did someone check that the sound's going out to the projectors? But professionals use checklists. And I think that's a decision you make. Am I a professional or an amateur?
That's right. And I think the way checklists are used is important. You know, you do the task, you tick it off. You do the task, tick it off. You don't do all the tasks, then 5 hours later tick your checklist off. I mean, you're opening yourself up to absolute disaster. You know, someone, let's say in sales or property management gets COVID, they pick your file up. Like, where do they start? You understand, you know, the use of them is really important. And I always say, like, when the volume of work increases, when checklists save you. You might be able to cope now at the pace you're going at, but if the business is in growth mode, it's only a matter of time before you get found out. And then when that thing slips through the cracks, boy, oh boy, you lose a couple of days.
Absolutely amazing. Was there any more tips left in there, Daniel?
Lee, I think I'll just finish up with, I'm a really big believer that when you've got to use your diary as almost like the worrier or the reminder of you. So the way I run it is, if, you know, I promise something to you, well, the way my mind works is I don't put it in a task. I put it in my diary at a time that I need to worry about it, execute it, do something with it. And I just had this episode the other day with my daughter. So she's 10 years old. She says to me on a Sunday, she starts getting a bit upset. She goes, Daddy, I've got so much on. I've got violin, I've got piano, I've got netball, I've got all these tasks to do with homework. And she started crying. I said, honey, let's get Daddy's whiteboard out and start mapping out. We've got a full week we can do this. So we started diarising it, you know, the days that she's going to do it and so on. And I said, how'd you feel, honey? And she said, I feel a lot better. And I said, but let me show your Dad's diary. So I showed her my diary and she's like, oh, you got a lot of things in there. And I'm like, exactly, honey. The reason why I don't cry is because I leave my diary to worry about those things, you know. And I think that's a really big lesson in life, that there's always stuff that we have to do, and it does become overwhelming, because I think the way the mind works is it will loop and totally torment you until that thing's done. And use your diary to worry about those things. Use it as your insurance policy that nothing's missed and everything's in there with a scheduled time. And when you want to worry about it, do it, or delegate it or do something about it.
Couldn't agree more. You know, it's your memory, brain, mental health hard drive, and put it over there and know it's there. And you can rely upon that because you've recorded it, so you can actually review it, action it, and bring it in. But Daniel, thank you for joining us. We'd love to see you on the program again in the future. And you and I were just both at the Pullman on the Park Hotel. We're having breakfast. You were walking past, and it was like, you should appear on the audio.
Love it.
As you and I appeared on the Digital Live program many years ago, which was a huge success out there. But great to see you contributing and being part of this wonderful world of effectiveness. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for that, Lee. Really enjoyed our chat. And, we'll see you next time at the Pullman.
Thank you.